Welcome back. Well, we just surpassed the anniversary, the 1 year anniversary of Russia invading Ukraine. A lot of uncertainty a year ago, but now a year later, thinking that there would be some opportunity for U.S. grains. Matt, have we seen that come to fruition? I mean, this week we saw USDA's Ag Outlook Forum revise exports down even further. So, how has all of this shaken out from a U.S. standpoint?
I don't think that it's been near the windfall of exports that we thought that it was going to be. There's no doubt that Ukraine probably performed a little bit better than most expected, but at the same time, moving forward, I'm not so sure that we can count on production out of that portion of the world to be able to satisfy some of the export demand that they've been able to unsurface over the last several years. So I think part of the reason that U.S. exports are going to be down again is probably going to be more of your growing global demand out of South America, for instance. Brazil continues to grow in their dominance, in my opinion, and I think that they're going to leave probably the U.S. In second place, not just this year, but moving forward. Not only with corn, I think beans. Bottom line is, I think that you're looking at a heck of a lot of competition from that part of the world, especially with some of the currency situations that we've got to deal with.
Dan, I know you were one a year ago when we talked saying, this could be a realignment of world trade. We spoke to you in December at Milk Business Conference, and you were talking about the impressive pace of wheat exports out of those areas. So as we set today, what type of changes have we seen, and how are they continuing to get some of these exports out?
Tyne, I don't think any of us would have imagined that as the war started a year ago that we would have record wheat exports out of the Black Sea. Now, principally, it's a lot of Russia exporting 45 or 46 million tons, but one as an analyst would not have thought that part of the world would have record exports of grain and wheat in a time of war. Nonetheless, that's what's happened, and the Russians had a very big crop. We can all argue whether it was 92 or 102 million tons of wheat last year, but they are just spitting out wheat in every direction, and I don't see it changing, at least until we get into a new crop position of May. Then it all becomes a weather scenario. What are we going to get for weather in the Northern Hemisphere? Is the EU going to come back and help supplant some of those losses in Ukraine? But that's what the market will be watching. But here today, Russia's not missing a bid, and it's a problem because world milling prices is now trading over Gulf corn. So we're going to be losing some corn export demand just because of the cheapness of wheat.
Well, Matt, the grains are having trouble finding some bullish information later this week, but that is not the case for the cattle markets. When you look at this atypical case of BSE that was detected in Brazil, I mean, just another bullish factor that we saw cattle prices make new highs. But when you look at history, is this something that, cattle producers need to act on? Will this be short-lived? Or, is this something that actually could have some legs in this market?
I think we didn't, as you said, we didn't necessarily need any more bullish information. Fundamentally speaking, this is just an extremely bullish setup. Everyone has been talking about it for quite some time, and most people are leaning that direction. And so it certainly warrants a little bit of caution. But whenever you start talking about, for instance, other folks not buying, particularly China, out of Brazil, whenever it comes to beef exports, I mean, bottom line from the U.S. standpoint is that you're in a tight situation. This is at the same time, that we're seeing a little bit of healing up as far as the Western Corn Belt goes. And a lot of the forecasts are kind of calling for that to continue to be the case. And so pastures should be in better shape than what they were. I know some of the folks in that part of the world have shared with us that preliminarily they're sure looking at retaining heifers to a great degree. If that happens this year, as far as fat cattle prices go, third and fourth quarter into first quarter next year, I think you could see some serious fireworks.
Dan, Matt mentioned it, but this week, after, there's questions on the timeline of when this case was detected in Brazil. Nonetheless, we are seeing Brazil announce they are not going to have beef exports to China. So when you look at that, does that create opportunity for U.S. beef exports into China? Or is there some question marks on how all of this will fall out in the beef market?
It should. I mean, indeed, if this is a case that is going to be reflective of the situation in Brazil, countries will have at least a 6-month waiting period to make sure that they're BSE free. Brazil exports about 3 million metric tons of beef a year. That's twice of what we do in the United States. So if even a portion of that demand comes our way, we're not in a position supply-wise to handle that, to Matt's point. So as I think about it, it's another bullish feather in our hat, if you will. We've got to see if the export demand shows up. Of course, U.S. political relations with China are not the best today, but I do think that we'll see some carry-through demand from Brazilian shortfall, if you will, on BSE or zoological problems, and we'll see how that all transpires. But boy, the cattle market is just really setting up to be something special in terms of upside potential as we look towards the end of this year.
Dan, Matt, thank you so much. Well, we talked about the situation in Ukraine a little bit earlier in this roundtable, but up next, we will actually have stories from the front lines with Howard G. Buffett. That conversation is right after the break.
U.S. Farm Report is brought to you by Duracade Viptera,